Greetings there, pedagogy practitioners who strive for excellence of execution in their practice. This is the first video in a series dubbed Data Champions, where we will be discussing, you guessed it, data. More specifically, we will be discussing how various tech tools can be used to disaggregate various data points to glean insights into students' progress. On a macro level, entire school districts may use certain models like ADDIE or backward design to develop district-wide goals and then implement a plan to meet these goals, which obviously were informed by triangulating various data points such as test scores, demographic information, and student attendance. And it is a common best practice to continue this on a micro level in the classroom, as indicated by various teacher evaluation models, which emphasize using data points to inform instruction. Of course, looking at data points, such as the one I previously mentioned, may broadly tell you about what trends exist among groups and, thus, which groups may need some additional support or extra interventions, but they certainly won't tell you why said supports or interventions are needed. As such, there is a need to observe and analyze some qualitative data points, and one source of these data points, on a classroom level, is the exit ticket. The purpose of the exit ticket is threefold. For the student, it allows them to reflect on their own learning at the end of a lesson. For the teacher, it allows the teacher to determine how well students understood what they claim to have understood, and it allows them to determine what concepts or aspects of a given concept have to be revisited in subsequent lessons based on overarching trends in student responses. Of course, this can become a very cumbersome process, as many exit ticket responses are open-ended and will result in a lot of data to sift through on a daily basis, and though it is a formative assessment, many teachers will insist on providing a grade, and thus a lot of grading to do. Fortunately, there are tech solutions to streamline and expedite this process, solutions that will yield much better and more accurate results at that. One way this can be accomplished is by having the destination for the exit ticket response be a virtual one rather than a physical space in the classroom, and that virtual space will be provided by using a Google form. This is an example of an exit ticket one might use for a language arts class, during which the concept of parallelism in literature was taught. The idea is that students will be responding to all exit tickets for a specified period of time, in this case, a week, on this single form. The directions include a description of how many responses are required of students per week, and students' school emails are automatically collected as a potential primary key. For the purposes of this video, however, I use the faux names of my students, as I made sure to type them exactly the same way each time, which is necessary for a primary key, as the primary key is a unique identifier that pulls data from various places in a given database. Essentially, each time a student responds to the exit ticket question, their responses will be imported into a Google Sheet. There will initially be one tab with all of the students' responses, and each additional response will immediately be reflected on this sheet after it is linked. As a side note, you can wrap the text and adjust the cell size as you wish. I like to view everything as such, especially as it makes it easier for me to look at the calculations yielded by the formulas I have in various columns, the results of which will also automatically update with each student's response. For instance, I have formulas in these two columns, which are conducting a word count for each item in the exit ticket, as if these are to be graded, they ought to be graded for completion as opposed to accuracy, especially with respect to the more open-ended type of exit ticket questions. And since these responses are meant to evaluate not the student's mastery, but what the student will need to review moving forward, teachers will want meaningful responses, and we can make reasonable assumptions as to how long a response must be in order to constitute a valid response that will produce meaningful data to allow the teacher to draw such conclusions. I determined that the response for each item must be at least 10 words, and these two columns are assigning a point value for each valid response. And these calculations are going to be used to assign a grade on the next tab, where, as you can see, I have all of the unique respondees listed in the first column. Whereas their names appeared multiple times in the first tab, their names will only appear once here, and the formulas running in these associated columns will only be calculating the data associated with the name that appears in each respective row, which is why the primary key must be a unique string that is always typed exactly the same way. In the second column, the formula is calculating the grade of the student on a scale of 0 to 100, assuming that the student should have 2 responses by the end of the week, since I only generated 2 faux responses per student. And again, as students submit responses, these calculations will automatically update. So there you go, the grades are done. Rather than combing through each individual response to see if it met the minimum length requirements, which, let's be honest, can take hours upon hours depending on how many students you have, all you have to do is input the grades into whatever student information system you're using, whether it be PowerSchool, Genesis, Infinite Campus, or anything else. And if it makes it easier for you, there are ways to alphabetize the data by last name. In any case, the grading can be done far more quickly, in no time at all in fact, leaving us more time to draw conclusions from the data. And this is a process that can also take a lot of time, as it could also require combing through all responses, all 80 to 175 of them, and finding trends that exist with respect to what common or recurring elements of the overall concept being reviewed appear in the responses to each item. For instance, in the event that this exit ticket is a response to a language arts lesson on parallelism, the students will have to understand the concept and its function as it pertains to other topics and elements of literature, like how and why it's used by authors, and that it refers to a specific type of sentence or line structure in stories and poems, respectively, and how it can be used to emphasize a story or a poem's theme. And there might be certain topics or elements of literature to which parallelism pertains, but the relationship between those topics or elements to the specific concept of parallelism may or may not be clear to the students, and the teacher can determine this by observing what topics or elements of literature are consistently and predominantly mentioned by students in their response to each exit ticket item. Having these responses populate to a Google Sheet makes this process far more expedient as well, as this column, entitled Learned Word, has a formula that is extracting the most frequently used words from all responses to the item where students denote what they learned, and this column, entitled Questions, has a formula that is extracting the most frequently used words from all responses to the item where students denote what questions they had, along with a corresponding count of how many times those words were used. As such, since the word sentence is the second most frequently used word in the learned column, I can safely assume that the students, by and large, understand that the way the sentences are structured in a given paragraph or stanza can contribute to the creation of parallelism, and if I look at their actual response in full, I would be correct in that assumption. The same holds true for the most frequently used words in the questions column. Since theme is the most frequently used word there, I can safely assume that students don't understand how or that parallel structure contributes somehow to the development of the theme in a given text, and so that is what I will have to review in class the next day, all without having had to engage in the cumbersome and time-consuming task of combing through each individual response, which would be so exhausting that we won't even have time to make all the necessary adjustments to our next day's lesson. Of course, the sheet can be modified to provide different data points and information, but the point is that having students respond to exit tickets using a Google form makes the process of analyzing students' exit ticket responses much quicker and easier. The fruits of hours of labor yielded in mere minutes. And, as an added bonus, it provides you with documentation of having data-driven instruction for those exciting Domain 1 and 4 conferences. You can feel free to engage in some DIY and try to replicate the sheet yourself. I'll include the formulas in the description of this video, but if you'd like me to create a sheet like this for you and with customization, feel free to contact me through my Fiverr account. Link in the description as well. For more tips on how to optimize student output while minimizing teacher exertion, smash that subscribe button, craft a comment, and leave a like. Until next time.